Okay. I don't have to do any intro because as soon as I give you the mic.
Okay.
No, I know. As soon as you have the mic, man, you're on.
I'm on? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Hello. Okay, we have, I'm going to start this going fun. So we have an hour with this group to have a conversation about whatever. And that means it should be pretty lively. And that means that Q&A from all of you and having it be back and forth is much more interesting, I think, for all of us than everybody here just sort of holding forth. So start thinking about questions that you have that they can begin to answer, okay? So, all right, good. Anybody here want to make an opening statement about making things and the benefit of students having the experience, as I was just talking about people over there, about making something that wasn't there before, it could be in any medium whatsoever. And what do you think about that and its importance?
So Victor told me to go first. I was like, well, I was just thinking of the answer myself. So my name is Ashanti Branch. I run a program called Ever Forward. It's a youth development and mentoring program for young men in grades 6 through 12. And so, making things. So when I started the program, I was not trying to tell you what I'm going to tell you on Friday. So I'm trying to like give you another version, right? I was a math teacher. And I really believe that math education for young people who come to high school averse to math, hating math already, it's about how do we make work for them in projects that allows them to think about math differently. And so, as a person who loves math, I knew that many of my students came to my class not loving math. And so, when I started the Ever Forward Club as an organization, it was just trying to help young people in a different way. Like what I couldn't do with them in my math class, I could do with them in this support group team about building brotherhood and building deep connections around conversation, around having really healthy, honest conversations. And so the way that I engaged them outside of class was, look, I need you all to do a project. We need to do community service. And I need you all to manage it. And so for these students that were in my program were students who were really not engaged in school at all. So they were failing most of their classes. They were like not engaged and not living anywhere near their potential. And so for them to hear me tell them I want them to create something, they're like, dude, you're asking for a little bit much. I don't even want to be here. Like, I don't want to be doing no extra. Thank you for the pizza, but it's not quite convincing enough. And so our first event that they had to create was called the 24-hour relay challenge. Now I went to Cal Poly, so SLO people probably know about it, because at SLO High School they had this event called the 24-hour relay. It was a community building project where students walk and run for 24 hours on a team of 10. And it's just a great community building project. Because when I tried to get my students to do community service, they were like, well, I'm not in trouble. I didn't do nothing wrong. Because in their mind, community service means you did something wrong. That's all they knew about community service. And I was like, okay, we won't be cleaning up no streets. We need to do something different. And so I always thought that the way I could do it is make it fun. How to make it exciting for them and get them engaged in what they're excited about. I said, well, here's an idea, I need you all to run with it. And that first event that happened in 2005, they put it on. Like, they were the ones who I put them to work. And a lot of the work was me creating the work for them to do the work, but it was the front end of helping them build up their own self-esteem around, I can do something big. And even though there was only 50 participants, like, they were proud. Like, they were proud of the work that they had done, because they knew that everything we ate, they had to call the people and get the donations. Like, everything all the games they had, like, it was all in their hands. And so, I'll stop there, and I imagine there are more questions, but I guess I'll just say that the overarching belief was that I know that our young men are capable of incredible things. it's about creating an environment where they not only are expected to do incredible things, but that they're not only held to high expectations, but they also have high support. Because I can have great goals and things I want you to do, if I don't have the support mechanism to really make sure that when you say, I don't know how to call that person and ask them for a donation, that I can support you in making a phone call. Something as simple as a phone call is sometimes challenging for a lot of them. So I'll stop there. I'm sure the competition will give Richard.
Good afternoon, everyone. I literally drove in when I showed up at the workshop in the elementary school from the Bay Area. It's always great to be here. My name is Victor Diaz. I'm the founder of 2 charter schools in Berkeley, a middle school and a high school. But I want to go back in time to respond to that question when I resisted being a classroom teacher, a formal one, for a long time. I didn't want to do a credential program. So I worked in community schools, alternative ed, continuation schools, juvenile hall. That's kind of where I found my niche early on. Mostly because I went to 6 high schools while I grew up in San Jose and went to 6 high schools in about 3 years and was kicked out when I was about 16. So it was a natural place for me to find other young men that were on the same trajectory that I was in. And so when I started working with them, I didn't have a plan or a goal that, I had some ideas of what I wanted to do with them. I think, looking back now, I think what I wanted was more for myself to kind of validate my own experience in school. And I knew just being there that I needed to be vulnerable to share my story, to get to know the young people. So for me, making was about knowing their stories, right? Knowing who they were, what connection we had with each other. And unfortunately, that some of these things were still happening, 10, 20, 30 years later. So I was fortunate enough to work in San Francisco at a continuation school there. And I think there were 3 things that I think about in terms of making it. One of them was that I needed to be vulnerable and humble enough to share my experiences with them. That was really important if I was going to ask them to be expressive. And making something is very expressive, be very, very vulnerable. So I needed to demonstrate that, to model that for them. Second, I needed to be accessible and visible outside of the school community, outside of the school boundaries and outside of the school time. And so I needed to respectfully make my way into their community to have a greater context for the things that I was asking of them, right? And then third, I had to be more fearless than I thought that I even could be, because when they started putting ideas out there, I didn't want to demonstrate any fear, like, whoa, you guys really want to do that? And so I needed to be able to still facilitate that and be thoughtful about what that meant. So those are 3 things that I struggled with quite a bit in terms of making. So I would probably say that my first making project with them, which I think the first time it was something audio in terms of capturing their stories, and then it became video and audio, and then we made posters to tell their stories and to capture their stories. So it started out in some of the most basic steps like that before we wrote and published anthologies and other things. I was an English teacher for about 7 years before I was a principal for about 8 years. But looking back, I think the making and the benefit was maybe even more for me in validating my experiences than they have been for them in those early projects. So I'll leave that.
Okay, good, thanks. So while we still wait for questions, which I know there'll be a lot of very, very soon, I want to...
Some even now.
Are there?
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I just said this is what it's called the wait. Okay, okay, so while you 2 gentlemen are thinking of examples of things that students did that surprised you because you might have had an expectation that it wouldn't be as powerful as it was, okay? And I want to ask Rob something, because career in tech has always had sort of a duality of inside school and internships outside of school. And there are two that he did outside of school that was like sometimes my favorites ever. One was at Polaroid, and another one was called the Career and Education Program, which was a really interesting one because they were clients of the same institution, but they were now playing a different role in pick either one, and we could tell the folks a little bit, whichever one we're talking about or both. Okay. Let me talk about the Cambridge Leslie Careers and Ed program, because this was our second internship program. We had already done the Cambridge Polaroid Technical Internship Program, but then we had this idea that wouldn't it be interesting if we had some of our students going out into elementary school classrooms in Cambridge, and then so they would do that a couple of mornings a week, and then they would go to Leslie College with me as their teacher, co-taught with a Leslie College professor in education to have a reflective seminar about their work in these classrooms. And this time in our large high school, I mean, we had a kid who was in the Cambridge Polaroid program who was, she was interested in plumbing, and she did plumbing with the program, but she got into Mount Holyoke College, and the next year, her guidance counselor was telling other students, don't go to that program, you won't get into a good college. So, I mean, this is about the technical academic divide in our high schools and so on. But the point is that in order to do this program, we had to pull kids off the grid. We had to pull them out of the schedule because they were going to spend a whole morning, all week long, either at Leslie College or in elementary school classrooms. So we had to figure out what kind of credit they're going to get, all this and that. They were going to get humanities credit, English and social studies, and they were going to get technical credit. And that's the way we did it. But partly because of that, guidance counselors didn't want to send too many kids there, except for the kids that couldn't deal with school. And so we're taking kids who couldn't deal with school, and a few of the guidance counselors. I was in the teacher's cafeteria picking up my lunch one time. A teacher came to me and said, well, standing next to me in the line, she said, I see that you got so-and-so and so-and-so. I just want you to know, you're going to be in your program next year. These are the two worst students I've ever had in the worst class I ever had. Good luck to you. And so they showed up in the class, and these are very schooly alienated kids. There were two of the kids. We had a house system in high school. They didn't have a house because they got kicked out of every house they were in. But you should have seen these kids in elementary school classrooms because they knew the game. And they knew which kids were going to get in trouble, and they knew how to help those kids. So they found themselves, they found a way to be engaged in an institution that had essentially rejected them. So it's very inspiring to me to see that. And I'll just tell you one story. So we're talking about, over at Leslie, by the way, my co-teacher in that course was Nancy Carlson Page, who's done a lot of interesting work on film and children's toys and so forth, and violence and male-female stereotypes and so forth, but also happens to be the mother of Matt Damon, who was also my student at Cambridge Venture Lab. There's a lot of other stories around that. So we're in a seminar, and Glenda Delgado is saying, yeah, I was in, and we had a couple of kids in the bilingual program who were in elementary school bilingual classrooms. And so when they did their exhibition stuff, their presentations and learning, they did it in Spanish. So we had that kind of thing going on as well. And we had a kid who was in the kindergarten class that she had been in the same elementary school she had been in, with her kindergarten teacher, helping her kindergarten teacher now, like 12 years later, in that same classroom. So just some incredible kind of closing the loop kinds of things that were going on. But so Glenda one day is saying, yeah, Jose, he's a bad kid. He's just a bad kid. And
I said, so what do you mean by bad kid? And so she started talking about all the things that he was doing and so forth. And so I was saying, do you think a bad kid can become a good kid? And she said, no, he's bad. He's just a bad kid. So I went home and I was talking to my wife about this. And she said, you should read, and you should have them read, Einer Klut, a poem from Edgar Lee Masters' Spoon River Anthology. And this is a poem about a young woman in the town who becomes a prostitute and goes into other towns and stuff like that. And now she's buried and she's speaking from the grave. And she tells this story. Suppose you got a kid. He steals an apple. And everybody then calls him a thief. He stole the apple. He's a thief. 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 What does he become? He becomes a thief. And it wasn't the theft of the apple, but the calling him of a thief that caused him to become a thief. And then she said, that's how I became who I was, who I became. So we read that in class, and the kids are saying, oh, it's not that Jose is a bad kid. It's that we've been calling him a bad kid, and there are ways for him not to be a bad kid. If we don't call him a bad kid, so I said, Lenny, you need to catch Jose doing something nice and get all over him about that. Very nice work, Jose. I noticed that you did that. She comes back the next day, the next time we meet together, she said, I saw him helping someone in the line, and I went and told him that was a really nice thing to do. And he just smiled. So, I mean, these things were happening with the kids. So this is not about making, but it's about thinking about what you're doing and reflecting on what you're doing and being in a context that you know well, but being able to see yourself differently in that context. So for me, the whole thing about internships has been about the reflective process. When you go out in an internship, you become more than you were before, but you're not really more than you were before until you understand that you are more than you were before, which is why it is so important to accompany these experiences out there with reflective context where kids can reflect on their experience and write about it and share it and so forth, and therefore become fully in articulating who they are. Not just doing and becoming, but articulating who they are. To me, that was what was moving and inspiring, and it changed my thinking about a lot of things, was engaging in these reflections with kids about the work that they were doing in the world.
I just want to add another 2 cents. My son was in Matt's grade, and he was raised on my block. And Nancy's work was also about the effect of violence in films on youth. And when I first saw the first Bourne movie, which I loved, I thought, this one is going to be good. I always have to say that. But anyway, so you guys were considering, so like questions, you guys were considering this question about somebody who made something that wasn't there before, or did something that wasn't there before that was impressed beyond your expectation. And I also want to morph that into something else that Rob just raised, and that is that, you know, there's this assumption, which has offended me forever, that those kids who go into vocational technical are not as bright as the ones who are academic, which is just, it is so utterly untrue from my 15 years of doing it. So I want to work that into your having seen something that was better than you might have imagined. Maybe you're ready for that work.
Okay. Well, I mean, the short response is that they always want to do more than you ask. Like that was my experience. Whatever project or making we were doing. But I'll tell you something that actually surprised me more than anything. This was when I was substitute teaching in Oakland Unified. This was back when Pete Wilson was the governor, and they were incentivizing districts and schools to reduce their class size. And so what many teachers did was they said, you know, you four over here that are the worst kids, you guys go to the library or something, meet the principal, and they're going to take you to a new class. So I showed up at a school. I won't name this, well, sure, I'll go to school. I don't know. I think I know that sophomore company. So this is Frick Middle School. So I showed up at Frick, and they had long-term subs in this position for, I think this was maybe about the 7th day of school, and they already had like 9 subs by this time, right? This is 95, 96, right around. And so I get there, and I was the super sub, right? Like I made my own curriculum, I traveled with my curriculum, and I had always expected the teachers were not going to leave lesson plans. So I didn't want to be with kids in a class and not give them something. So I made a reader of readings that I knew they hadn't seen or read before, right? So I shared this with Ashanti, so that I would come to them with a reader with, you know, I'll show that another time. But anyhow, so I showed up with my curriculum, and I'm there to take this lesson, and the vice principal at the time was really surprised that I showed up for the assignment, that I had something for them to do. So he pointed me to where the classroom was, and when I got there, it was an old home economic class. So I think there were about maybe 7 or 8 sewing machines that had been broken down, and about 5 or 6 stoves that were all in disrepair. So I didn't pay attention to it that much in the beginning, but as I'm trying to get the class set up and write my assignment on the whiteboard, the kid comes in and he started grilling me right away, right? Like, who the fuck are you? And, you know, it's kind of like sizing me up. So I'm asking him, how long have you guys been in this class? And he tells me we've been here since the first day of school. And then I think I may have said under my breath, like, this class is pretty fucked up. Like, it's a shitty classroom, right? And so I think that, you know, the young kid must have thought that, like, I was cool because I cussed. But it was offensive to me, and I didn't know any other way to describe it at the time than that. So, you know, this was already a really tough neighborhood in a school at the time that was already, you know, the facilities was already in terrible shape. And this classroom was the worst in that building. And so when I asked the kid, you know, well, you know, have you guys said anything about this? And they're like, oh no, they don't care about us. And so at this time, other kids are coming in, and I said to the kid, you know, so I said, I have stuff for you all to do, but at this point, what do you all want to do about this classroom? And they said, we want to tell the principal about it. And I said, okay, perfect. So the lesson plan was kind of just going along. So I said, okay, I'm going to stand at the whiteboard, and this will be our assignment. We're going to write a letter to the principal. And I said, I'm going to capture whatever you guys want to say to her. So of course they wrote it, like every second word was a cuss word. So I'm writing it down though, right? But that gave me a chance to talk about, you know, language and audience and what it was that we wanted to accomplish, and what do we wanted to get from that, from whomever the reader was going to be. And I said, you know, we'll leave the words in here, but what do you think our chances are of getting the thing we want if this is what it's going to say? And so, anyhow, we finished the assignment, we wrote it up, and I typed it out, and 2 kids took it over to the principal, they ended up handing it to the vice principal. And he came back a few minutes later, he pulled me out of the classroom and asked me if I wanted to stay for the assignment, and if so, then they would change the classroom. So that became my first long-term job, and I stayed there for the remainder of the year. But immediately, as Ashanti was saying, right, so these were kids who had been singled out as ones that were disinterested in learning, and immediately they wanted to own their education, they wanted to own their space, and it was by far probably the best year of teaching that I've ever had. And we got a lot of great work done, we read a lot. I brought in different pieces of readings, and they would ask me, what else has Sapphire published, what else has Huey Newton published, what else has Asada Shakur published, and they were reading all of that. They wanted to consume more of it quicker than I could even bring it in. And so, I don't know if there was a physical thing that we made other than our community and our space, but that was a result of being shocked by you know, my expectations, right? Like, so.
So I'm often amazed. And so I'm trying to figure one story, one project. I'm not doing a good job. I don't want to ramble, but I want to say one thing I experienced just recently with a group of students. So I'm at a school where we're doing a social emotional class. for young men. So it's like ever forward. We're normally once a week after school, but this school has us doing like a curriculum. So I'm trying to create 4 days of curriculum a week for a group of young men. So there are like 11 of them, 12 of them. And these are young men who I didn't know it day one, but I realized it after the first week that there was something going on with a lot of them. And so I went to the vice principal. I said, "Hey, I'm noticing a few things about some of these young men in this class." And she was like, "Oh, you haven't seen the list?" I'm like, "No, I haven't, no." She's like, "Oh, you have a few minutes?" I'm like, "Yeah." So she goes down the list of the stuff that they're all dealing with, right? One mother died 2 years before. One has Tourette's. One had like a list. I mean, it was like, if you didn't think that it was necessary to let me know that they were all going to be in the same class, right? And I was just confused. And I was like, okay, so my perceptions were high and I was clear, but I did know that they were incredible young men. And so one of our assignments was like, how do you get them to start talking about themselves? Like, how do you get them to start talking about me? And I think Tyrone Douglas, who's from, I want to say university, I'm going to get the university wrong, but he's a professor. He just wrote a book called Border-Bound Brothers. And he talks about this journey of African-American young men having to battle against borders of not only their community, but expectations. And so when I began to ask them about themselves, sometimes they're stuck. Right, so I say, tell me 10 words to describe you. And I let them just say, go. It's like a list of 10. And most of them come up with 5 pretty quick. And then they stop. Like they're like, most of them get to 7. Like they can't think of 10 words that describe themselves. And I say to them, look, it is almost impossible for you to fail this assignment. Because you are the expert of you. Like, no one knows you better than you know you. So, if you are right now not able to think of 10 things, then you like go get some water, go get some fresh air. Like, you have to be able to have 10 words to describe yourself. Even if they're not the prettiest words. Even if they're not the most exciting thing to tell. But you have to have 10 words. And so, what I began to realize was that when I limited this number 10 to them, it was a barrier for some of them. So I said, well, look, you can tell me a story. Like, you can tell me a story. Take the next page and just tell me a story about something that you've been through. Tell me a story. And so what I realized was that for some of the young people who are always taught that if I don't do what my teacher's asking me to do, like I'm not doing what you want me to do, so therefore there's something must be wrong with me. So I'm going to put some more barriers. And if I'm not wise enough as a teacher to say, well, you know what, let me just try and switch this up for you. Let me try and make this still possible, because I know that you know more about you than anybody else. Let me try and help you make this work for you. So how about you just do something a little bit different? Like how about you over here, you got 10, great, thank you. You can't get 10, but I need you to do something, so how about you just twist it a little bit? And so what I learned, what surprised me was that once I'm able to back off of being locked into the results, like, I don't need 10 words. Technically, I made up 10. It could have been 5, right? Like, it wasn't that I needed 10. It was, I put 10 things on the paper, so therefore you should have 10 things in there. Well, I could have just randomly had picked 5. Like, it wasn't a number that I was locked into. But if I got stuck in my assignment saying, you're not finished, you're not finished, you're not finished, and I put pressure in places that didn't need pressure, I wasn't able to be flexible and let them show their knowledge in another way, I could have lost them. And I think that happens a lot. It happens a lot. Like, we have our list. We made our fancy spreadsheet or my family worksheet. Like, I typed the worksheet. I wanted all the lines filled in. But in that moment, when I realized that there were a barrier there, I had to be able to pivot. I had to be able to flex. And I had to be able to move and say, we're going to try this another way. So that they can still begin. Because what I've experienced with young men, when they don't feel that they can be who you're expecting them to be, then most of them choose just not to be at all. And we lose so many of our young people because they decide, you know what, forget all this. Tyler, you put your spreadsheet, your worksheet, I don't care about this stupid stuff. And then you're like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong? Right? Because we miss the fact that sometimes they're trying to tell us that what we're asking is not where they're at. And so that's just something that surprised me and learning how to pivot in that moment.
I think it's a beautiful story, Ashanti, and it reminds me of when we do have that list and things that we're looking for, then sometimes we miss the stuff that's there, the achievements that's there. You make me think of a time when I was running this writing center, and actually a kid from Larry's program, from your carpentry class, was up there with a teacher, and he had written this piece, and it was like 3 paragraphs long, and he had ended it. I mean, the hardest thing to write when you're writing, for anybody, is the conclusion. The hardest thing is to wrap it up. And this kid had written a beautiful wrap-up sentence to what he had done. And he took it to show it to the teacher, and the teacher said, I wanted 4 paragraphs, you've only given me 3. And so I went up to the teacher. I mean, I'm in a situation, I can't be showing up as teacher in front of her whole class and this and that, so I'm contradicting her. But I just went to her and I said, look at what Johnny's done here. I mean, look, he's written this unbelievable conclusion to this thing. And I don't know whether that had any impact or not, but all I know is that that expectation that he should have 4 and he only had 3 prevented her from seeing the achievement that was there. I want to say just one other thing about things that it surprises me every time I come out here to High-Tech High, and I am an East-West commuter. Every time I come out here and I go to our K-5 schools, I see elementary kids doing stuff that they're not supposed to be able to do developmentally. I mean, they're building things. They're doing another, from our graduate program, kids were doing, 2nd graders were doing community service. I mean, they were doing service, they were making things for kids in the hospital who were their age. And a teacher was doing that as part of her graduate project, her master's project and thing. And she said, I want to do community service to 2nd graders. And we said, well, okay. And then she did her literature search, right? The literature review. There's nothing in the literature about community service for early elementary. Nobody's doing it because people think it can't be done. And she went ahead and do it. So every time I come out here, when I think about, when I visit these elementary schools that we try, and we have this big opportunity to see what High-Tech High would look like at K-5. It's been just unbelievable and beautiful what we see, the things that kids can do.
Now we will wait. We can be very patient. We're going to just wait for questions. Don't be shy. Thank you. Okay.
You understand them.
So when the students spoke, we heard over and over and over, communities and really family. I think from every single student. Is there anything that High-Tech High does, professional development-wise, activities-wise, beginning of the year, during the middle of the year, end of the year, before school starts, to kind of get this rolling, or is it just something that kind of happens because you hire the right people, or do you have a plan to build community, to build this family feeling?
Well, I'll just start. Okay, one thing that happens is that we have public exhibitions of work. So if you were here when those happened, the hallways, right here at this elementary school, you can't walk. It's absolutely jammed with families, grandparents, and everybody. And everyone's looking at his work. And so kids have this feeling of, everyone's looking at my work. The beauty of that is that's something that's typically missing in schools. So for example, let's say that the 4 of us are students, or the 4 of us are faculty. And everyone's looking at his work and his work and his work. And no one's really looking at my work that much. I'm a teacher, right? Or a student. And I'm feeling like I want everyone to look at my work. So I'm really looking at what they did. And I'm thinking the next time, I think I'm going to do some more of that. So I think that there's something about making it real and making it present that has made students here and faculty here have a sort of an ethic of excellence, actually, of trying to do it better the next time. And for a lot of us here who worked in the trades, for example, we already know, like, oh, I made that mistake already. I'm going to make a different mistake the next time, you know. And I really want this next one to be better than the last one. And I think a lot of schools don't have that. It's such an easy to do once you do it, you know.
Just one thing. In the middle and high school levels, all our kids are in advisory groups, and they're across age groups, so a little bit more like a family feel than a classroom, which is our classes are 8th graded. But every student who's new to high-tech high in middle school or high school gets a home visit from the advisor. So we know them, we've been in the kitchen, and that makes a huge difference in terms of that family feel that you're talking about. I think the other thing that in my work with teachers I try to emphasize, and here I am coming from a background as an English teacher, listening is the most important language arts skill. So we try to do a lot of work with our teachers and through our teachers with our students that really emphasize the importance of listening well to someone else. That's why I was saying earlier that for me the parent share exercise is a quintessential high exercise, just the importance of really listening. When you are in a community that's listening well, it starts to feel like time.
So one of the things I just want to I don't work here, but I do know about the creating a family environment. One of the things I'm just going to read back to what a student said today on the panel. She says, teachers are asking me how I am often. And then she says something like if you're a wreck on the inside, like the fact that the student said, like, if you're in a day, I don't know how your lives are, maybe, but if you ever have one of those days where you just like, I'm like close to the end of the rope. I don't need nobody to like come and tell me what I need to do. I just need I'm really just hoping somebody will just come and ask me how I'm doing. And I think that when the young men who come to our program, see, young men in my community, they're told that if you have any feelings, that you're weak. Well, you can have 3 feelings. You can have like super funny, happy. You can have like super angry, or you can have like I don't care. You can have those 3, but if you try to explore any other feelings, something's wrong with you, like there's a problem. And so when young men, in our specific work, get clarity that whatever you are feeling is okay, and it's accepted, I'm not judging you for it, I just want to know, what do you need from me? How can I support you? And I think that it absolutely changes everything. Like the young man who spoke about being adopted, like he was carrying some stuff. Like, I don't know if you heard it. Like he was like, I was always wondering, like, about my birth. I don't have my birth parents. Like, what does that mean about me? Like, questioning those things, and to be in a place where he said, you know what? I have some teachers here who are like my parents. Like that is something you can't put in a job description. Like you can't even say, like, here's what I need you to do. I need you to be parents with these kids. It's almost like you have to have people who love these kids, no matter what they're going through. And it means that for us as educators, we got to be taking care of ourselves in really good ways. And then it happens. Because young people recognize that you care about them. And I'll stop there.
I'll just add, so this is one thing we do really well at our school. We have a really strong advisory program. And you do get lucky because I was a principal for a really long time, and you can't sniff those things out in the interview. You do get some great folks who you just know are going to be great at it. But I also worry about those teachers. I realized early on that not everyone is built to do this work 24 hours a day, nor should they. And schools and districts don't do enough to structure the learning that an educator needs to be a strong advisor, right? Because schools and eds don't do that. And I think that this is something that if you are at a district, if you are at a county level, to put resources behind that, to have a team to build out advisory curricula, that's really amazing, right? Like that's a luxury, because similarly we have to teach educators about boundaries and young kids about boundaries, and that is part of a healthy community. That's part of a loving community. When you have to say no sometimes, and when sometimes a demonstrative feeling hurts somebody else's feelings. These are all new learnings for folks, but this is part of a healthy community that a lot of communities, I don't want to stereotype a community, but I think that's, you can transfer that over just about any community. So I will say that there is something beautiful and intentional about the community here, but I think this is also part of their life's work. I mean, it wasn't by happenstance. And so I think that similarly, districts have to be intentional about wanting to create the time for teachers to say, what does our community need? How do we write and craft and build some curricula? And then, how do we structure that in our day so that they're putting resources so that there's time in the day for that, things like that. So sometimes you do get lucky, you get great people, and sometimes they can carry an entire school site, but that's rare. I think if you all are leaders to take that back, if you don't have advisories, I don't know how you can do PBL without a strong advisory program. I almost feel like they're absolutely coupled inextricably. So thanks for that question. That's a really important question.
Yeah, if I had two wishes, if I could wave a magic wand and have two wishes for all of our schools. The first wish would be that every student in the school does internships in the world beyond school. And the second would be that teachers have a professional workday where they're able to attend to their own learning and build their own community during their workday.
Yeah, hello. I was wondering what your grading philosophy is.
We can hear.
Oh,
Grading
great. What your philosophy is on grades, how to give grades?
Oh, grades.
Yes.
I think they're overrated.
I'll just say that, I know I just walked in there briefly, but the folks who are running the PBL workshop, if you didn't attend that one, they had a lot of great points on there about assessment, which I think speaks to, most folks will tell you that, you want to go to a more holistic approach, and I think that team that was leading that workshop did a really amazing job at capturing, a lot of different ways to view, I would just maybe say more generally assessment than grading, because I think that we look at a lot of things as teachers and as school leaders. So I think that, just to put a period on it, I think that the team that ran the PBL, I'm sure if you did get a chance to that workshop, I'm sure they had notes for it. But that's one thing that you all have done amazingly well. Most folks that are new to PBL have a difficult time figuring out how do you evaluate. And I think that you guys have made it formulaic enough for you to follow, but yet it doesn't put kids in silos.
So I think when we think about grades, lots of times we think about the effect on the individual student, on self-esteem and so forth. I attended a Socratic seminar of some 7th graders in one of our middle schools, where your school did, where a student talked very eloquently about the effect of grades on the social relationships among the kids. And what it meant. What did you get? How come you got that? I didn't get that, and so forth. So I think when we're thinking about grading, it's not just about the individual kid who's getting the grade. It's also about what that does to all the relationships in it.
I just had a really great question about advice. I can be, I'm super loud. Okay, so I'll just stand. Anyway, okay. So I had an experience with the advisory system in another school, like private school, and I'm really rich. Can you lay out a little nitty-gritty about how you organize your kids into groups. For example, is each teacher and advisor 20 kids, do they meet once a week? I mean, how does that work within your day? Is there a time set aside for that? Because I think it's an interesting paradigm to consider, because it is indeed a huge
Yeah.
factor.
Yeah, I can tell you about ours real quickly. So again, we have about 300 kids at our middle school and about 400 at our high school. This is one of the core values of our school that it was built on. So our class size is about 24 to 1, and our advisory size is about 13 to 1. So a lot of folks outside of the classroom have advisories, and I've had, of our 7 years of operation, I think 3 of the 7 years I've had an advisory group as well, including through the startup years. So what we do is we have, so a number of folks, like as I said, including non-teaching staff, are advisors. So we meet we met before our school opened, and we meet every mid or early June, and we devise the themes that we're gonna talk about in general categories, and then teams break out to make them age level appropriate. And of course, there's some real specific things that happen at different ages, like puberty obviously is a little bit longer in the 7th grade years, and college advising happens in a little bit longer, right around the sophomore, junior part, right around there. So, but the teachers, we decide that, right? So we don't hand them the thing. We work, get together, and we spend, and the school pays for the teachers for that release time, and we spend about 40 hours of work time creating the curriculum. Kids in middle school are organized, up until this year, they've been organized by gender and by grade level. So we've been about 99% consistent in having girls with a female teacher and boys with a male teacher. We're in Berkeley, and I don't say this flippant or anything, but there has been a push in our community to have some gender neutral advisory. So this is our first year doing that. So there's some learning on our part about how to do that well. I think we sort of caught on to it toward the end, and we invited a parent to come in and talk with us about what it meant to label kids and to make them make that choice that early in their life. And that was something that we weren't aware of. So we had to kind of go back, to the factory and think that through a little bit. So for the first time, we have an advisor that identifies as a general neutral advisory. So that's some of the nuts and bolts of what we do. Talking about community, our advisories go on camping trips really early on in the year, so it's also a time for them to be out alone, outside of the building. I'm sorry, yes, they meet 4 times a week, and the advisory is 40 minutes a day, and it's 4 days a week. Wednesdays are sort of our minimum day when we have PD at the end of the day. Yeah, so it's 4 days a week. And that time and that consistency is the same from grade 6 through 12.
And I'm looking at Matt over there, King, who, one of our 5 high schools does not have multiple age grouping, and the rest do. I'm a fan of having 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders at high school level be in the same advisory group, because I want the 9th graders to watch the 11th graders go through the most measured year in a human being's life. I like them watching the 12th graders go through the anxiety of not knowing where they're going and what's going to happen, all that stuff, because otherwise they're really separated from it, and I find that those students who experience that, they have a lot more agency and comfort when they move into the 11th and 12th grade. And I've also found that a lot of students that are of different ages keep in touch with other people who are different ages. A lot of people are not into this. Later on, after they even graduated from college, because they really knew students well from their advisory group. Okay, one more. Yes?
It sounds like, particularly the gentleman at the end here, like you're doing a lot to address like critical consciousness, right? And those Freudian ideals that we were discussed earlier. How do your schools maybe, when we're talking about like creating agency and the students, becoming empowered and self-sufficient, right? That happens a lot, sounds like inside your school, but how does the school function as a larger member of the communities within which you work, right? Like, so how are you integrating whatever communities you're in there, right, into the school, or kind of the seamless thing, right? So like, we're not just like educating the kid to go to college to leave the community, right? But like that, it's an agency that's happening with the community to empower the whole community, right? Like, it's not just about the individual. So how are we all?
You're asking me specifically?
Yeah, well, anyone, but.
So in our first year, I managed to recruit a number of teachers and staff that were from the community that our kids were coming from. So that was very intentional on my part. I went to school where every teacher was commuting from somewhere else. So our teaching staff very much reflects the kids in a lot of different ways, and still does to this day, though we've grown to scale. Number two, each year we continue to add parents at a lot of different levels. I mean, there are some of my contractors and subcontractors and staff and support staff and IAs and teachers and subs on our board. I mean, they're at essentially every level. And again, we're at a charter school, so I know that, although my teachers are unionized, we have some flexibility, right? But there is parent participation and decision-making literally at every level in our organization. So that also changes the culture and the decision-making process quite a bit. Our teachers spend a lot of time and are intentional about the work that they do with the kids in the community. There's one kind of minor, where we're located in Berkeley, if you know that area, Richmond is only about, maybe 10 miles away, but on that commute, it's sometimes can be about an hour drive. But often our teachers are figuring out ways to get the kids and their classroom back into Richmond, right? And so a lot of that happens organically. And again, it's because of the folks that are on staff who is throughout. But that was intentional on my part in creating our board and staff.
I also think it's a good idea to make the community the text, and we did that with a big program called CityWorks back in Cambridge. And I think that CityWorks is what really kind of launched us into this type of work. And I have a big map of Harlem in my office in the other building, and there was someone who was starting a school in Harlem, and she said, okay, so how do I do this? How do I do this? How do I start? And I pointed to the map, and I said, make Harlem the text. You got the talented 10, you got jazz, you got literature. They came from all over the world. You can do the whole world from any place. And they all are part of that place, and there's so much you could do. So that's just another piece. Okay, our time is up. Thank you for coming up with some good questions, everybody.